Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Hello, this is Mark Charles. Today is Thursday, November 7th. I still have my second cup of coffee. It's now a cup of iced coffee that I put in the fridge to save it for this live stream. But yeah, I wanted to jump on and share a few thoughts about the 2024 presidential election. So uh, it's obviously the results are in. President Trump won by a fairly convincing margin. I think he had 72 million votes, almost 4 million more than Vice President Harris had. And so it was a fairly convincing victory for him, both in the popular vote as well as in the Electoral College. And so I want to just take some time to talk about that today. But before I begin, I want to do like I always do and acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what's called Washington, D.C. now. But these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And so I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humbling it is to be living, moving, breathing, walking on these lands today. Yá'át'ééh, my Piscataway relatives. I am deeply grateful for your stewardship of these lands. So as you know, leading up to this election, right? And let me see who's on with me for a second here. I know there's a few people who are jumping on early. Yá'át'ééh, thanks for joining today. I know there's a few others on. Good to see people here. So if you followed me up through the election, you'll know I was really trying to challenge people to think critically about both parties. I ran back in 2020 as an independent candidate, and I have a critique of both the left and the right and how neither side is really interested in addressing our deeper, more foundational issues as a nation. And so coming into this election, I was not endorsing any candidate. I wasn't rooting for any candidate publicly. I was really trying to get people to think, and I was looking at the candidates myself of thinking, okay, what is really going to be the best choice for us as a nation here to move forward? How do we want to move forward? Jessica, Yá'át'ééh, thanks for joining. Good to have you here. Glad you could join me this morning. Elaine, Yá'át'ééh, good to see you. Thanks for joining today. And Sean Yus, Yá'át'ééh, thanks for joining. Good to have you here. So yeah, I wasn't endorsing anyone before the election. I think everyone knew I was not excited about Biden when he was running, nor was I excited about Trump. I actually, at one point, long before President Biden even dropped out, I was calling on both candidates to drop out of the election. Trump, I believe, was not qualified to be president, and Biden, I thought, was too old and should be dropping out of the race. And so I was not clearly endorsing either one of those two candidates. And then when Biden did drop out, that moved Vice President Harris into the position. And I was excited about Vice President Harris, right? I was excited about the energy she brought to the campaign. I was excited to see a woman of color, a Black woman, an Asian woman running for office, the office of the presidency. And I was excited because when she ran in 2020, well, I didn't vote for her then, right? I was running against her in the 2020 election. I was running in the primaries against her, but I was running as an independent during the primary season. But she was against drilling. She was against fracking. She was taking some fairly strong stances on a few issues, which I liked. I appreciated those things. And so I was curious about her campaign as she took over for Biden in the 2020 election. And I shared this prior to the election. I was disappointed that she chose to stick fairly close to a lot of Biden's principles and values. She came out in support of fracking. She came out in support of drilling. When she was asked about it in her first sit-down interview, she said, well, my policies have changed, but my values haven't. And for me, that was not a satisfying answer, right? Because if your values don't reflect your policies, then I don't know why you have the values that you have. And that's the challenge we face. But I won't go into all of that right now. So anyway, that I was disappointed at the way she was kind of just maintaining the same course that Biden had set, not only in regards to uh, drilling and fracking, but also in regards to Israel and Gaza. And she did not appear willing to take a very hard stand on that conflict as well. And so I didn't endorse her publicly before the election, but I was glad she was in there. I was glad she was there over Biden, and I was glad there was a better alternative to Trump in the two-party race at least. But I was still keeping an eye on the third party. And I would say between Biden and Trump, or between Kamala and Trump, I was hoping between those two, if those were the two we had to choose who was going to win, I would really like to have seen Vice President Harris win that election as compared to Donald Trump. And so as I watched I did vote. I voted the day of the election, and I did vote. And as I watched kind of the election unfold throughout the rest of the day, and I didn't watch it much that evening, but I was paying attention and kind of keeping on top. Both my daughters were actually fairly engaged with this election. And so we were kind of as a family, not watching the news, but we were kind of keeping updates online about as votes were coming in, especially after 8 o'clock. And right, I don't even know if Vice President Harris had a lead ever in the race. I didn't see her even in the early returns as we were coming in on the East Coast returns. It seemed like Trump was up from the very beginning. And so there was never a point where it's like Trump overtook her, but he seemed to be leading from the very beginning of at least with the returns I was watching. And then I went to bed right after California released their numbers. They called California, obviously, for the Democrats. But a lot of the swing states in the East and the Midwest hadn't been decided yet. Pennsylvania hadn't been decided. Michigan hadn't been decided. Wisconsin hadn't been decided. A lot of those were still open. And I went to bed because I didn't want to ruin a night of sleep over the election. And so I went to bed about 11. I did wake up at one point in the middle of the night, and I checked my phone just while I woke, since I was awake. And it was about maybe 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not sure how much earlier, but they had at that point then called Pennsylvania for Trump. And so he had, I think at that point, he had 267 votes. It almost put him over the top of the 270 he needed to win. And then when I woke up in the morning around 6:30 or so, I don't know when they had called, but they had called Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was the state apparently that put him over the 270 mark. And so he was then the winner of the election. And I remember I wanted to go back to sleep at that point. It was like 6:15 in the morning. And I wanted to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. My brain was now thinking about the election, and it was thinking about 4 more years of Trump. And I couldn't help but think back to 2016 when Trump got elected in 2016. And I remember the feeling I had that day. And that I would say that day in 2016 was actually a darker feeling than I had in 2024. I remember I just woke up. I was shocked. I was literally shocked that Trump won. I was convinced that Hillary was going to win. And I was actually scheduled to speak at Wheaton College in Chicago the day after the election in 2016. And so I had to wake up early. I had to jump on a plane. And my critique of the 2016 election was, right, it was implicit versus explicit racism and sexism, right? The Democrats were being implicit and the Republicans were being explicit. And we were deciding as a nation, were we going to vote for an implicitly racist and sexist party and candidate, or for a explicitly racist and sexist party and candidate. And I had prepared my talk for Wheaton College for the fact that we would have elected an implicit party of racism and sexism. And I woke up to find that we had elected an explicitly racist and sexist president. And so I had to rewrite my talk on the plane going to Wheaton College that day. Not rewrite the whole thing, but just kind of change the way I framed it. Because I was literally shocked that day. And I remember it was a weird feeling as I got on the plane, as I sat in the airport, as I looked around thinking almost half of the people I'm looking at voted for Trump, which was bewildering to me because he was pretty clear about who he was. But one of the comforts, right, that I took in 2016 was that Trump didn't win the popular vote. In fact, he lost it by almost 3.5, 4 million votes. And so I thought that election, more than it being a critique on our nation, and while it was a critique on our nation, it was also a critique on our outdated and antiquated electoral college system, which has a myriad of problems. Anyway, but I saw it really as a critique of that system because, again, that system now went against the popular vote. We did not democratically elect Trump, but he gained his way into office through the Electoral College. And at least there was some comfort knowing that, okay, at least I know my nation didn't overwhelmingly vote for Trump. And a majority of our citizens, at least those who voted, did not want him in office. And that was not majorly, but minorly, minimally comforting to remember that, yeah, we didn't actually want him, even though we got stuck with him. But that wasn't the case this time, right? That wasn't the case in 2024. In 2024, the count's still growing. They're still counting the votes, but he's ahead by almost 5 million votes right now as they continue counting the actual final votes. I think it's 72 million to about 67 million the last time I saw. And right, that's more challenging. I actually grabbed a screenshot of the numbers a couple hours ago. Right, and this was about noon earlier today. So the Democrats had 68 million votes, and the Republicans and Trump had 72.7 million votes. So almost 5 million votes, 4.7 million votes different. And so this is a much different picture because it's not like he softened his views. He didn't become less racist, less sexist, less of a sexual predator between 2016 and 2024, or 2020 and 2024, even for that matter. If anything, became worse. He actually got convicted on a felony and found guilty on some other charges. And he was very clear as he spoke about what he thought of women, what he thought of people of color, what he thought of immigrants. He was very clear, not only by his words, but by the people he surrounded himself with and even called to run with him and serve potentially in his administration. And he was very, very, he was not hiding for a moment, not only what he stood for and what he believed, but he wasn't hiding for a moment his own narcissistic view of the world and how he saw himself in it. He made it abundantly clear he's not very articulate. He made it abundantly clear he doesn't have a grasp on what's going on geopolitically around the globe. He made that clear over and over and over again. He made it clear I can't even speak in complete sentences. And has the attention span of a child. He made that abundantly clear who he was. And I'm not, well, I won't go there yet. What I was most disappointed about is Donald Trump was crystal clear about who he was, what he stood for, what he believed in, what he was going to do. And this time, a majority of US voters, not a minority, a majority of US voters, by more than almost 5 million votes, said, yeah, that's the guy we want in office. That's the person we want representing us. And I felt a whole wave of emotions on that Wednesday morning. I felt some sorrow, some grief, some lament. I felt some frustration, not just with the fact that we elected him, but with the fact that the Democrats are not consistently a good alternative to Republicans, as was demonstrated by the very weak apology that President Biden gave just a week ago to Native peoples regarding boarding schools, turned it into a campaign event. So I felt some frustration, and I felt some embarrassment. Right? There's one image that sticks in my mind. I'll post the video for you. It's actually, I found the video this morning as I was thinking about this. It's on AP News. It's one of their raw videos. I'm going to put it into the chat right now. But I invite you to watch this video. I'm going to show you some shots of this moment, because this is one of the places when I saw this, and I saw this when it happened in 2017. And I just felt embarrassed when Trump was at a meeting of NATO leaders, and he's standing behind some of the leaders there, and he pushes his way in front of them, raises his head, tightens his shirt or his jacket, and stands there like a proud little peacock. And that move, and it's on the video. I welcome you to watch the video. That move, to me, as a citizen of the United States, that embarrassed me. Greatness, Mr. President, is not about standing in front of a bunch of other people. That's not what greatness is. That's how a child thinks about those issues. And when I saw our president behave like a child at a NATO summit, this is literally something you would see first graders doing. I shook my head in shame. This guy's our president. Right? Remember this picture? Talking about his taxes with his many manila envelopes of all of his tax forms and how complicated it is, right? And he never showed them to us. The guy's an entertainer. He's not a global geopolitical leader. He sucks up to dictators. He wants the approval of everybody has no ability to stand on his own. I felt when we elected him again, right? This is a guy who literally 3 weeks ago was swaying to his Spotify playlist at a rally. And I felt embarrassment. So I had these waves of emotions that I was thinking through all of these things on Wednesday morning. I knew I didn't want to jump on and say anything in case I said anything I would regret later. I was just processing my own emotions and the bigger problem. Last night, I finally posted a few things online as I was gathering a few thoughts. The first thing I posted was this. I said, that was not at all unexpected, but is nevertheless disappointing. Right? It's actually not at all unexpected that our nation decided to vote a white landowning male from the upper echelons of the 1% who is a convicted felon and a sexual predator, that we'd rather have him as our president than a woman of color. That was not at all unexpected, but it is nevertheless disappointing. Shows you just how low the bar is for white landowning men in our country. And then later, last night, I posted this. And I said, at least in 2016, we could comfort ourselves knowing he didn't win the popular vote. But in 2024, he ran again, reminds us of exactly who he is, and reiterated his degrading opinions towards women, immigrants, people of color, and a myriad of others. And this time, a majority of U.S. voters said, yeah, that sounds good. I'm voting for him. I'm lamenting that my country is proud of its bigotry. Now, of those of you who know me, I'm sure you're saying, well, come on, Mark, you know this, right? You teach on the doctrine of discovery. You're exposing all of us to how these things are such a part of our foundational problems. And right, these are who we were as a nation and who we are and what we wrestle with. And this is, right, I mean, why would this be a shock to you? And again, it's not a shock. But after the civil rights movement, after the election of our first Black president, after 20 years of even me personally engaging in teaching my nation its history and responding to the problem of Trump, right? After his 2016 election, I wrote and published, co-authored and published a book on the doctrine of discovery and critiqued the American church, both the left and the right, for what they're doing politically. In 2020, I ran for president with a vision of building a nation where we, the people, might actually mean all the people in addressing our problems of racism and sexism and white supremacy at a foundational level. And the country greeted my campaign with a collective, not even a yawn, but by literally turning its back and saying, we don't even want to talk about those things. And now in 2024, I did my best from the sidelines to make a sharp bipartisan critique of what we're doing as a nation and what's going on. And the thing I'm wrestling with the most, again, in 2016, at least we could say we didn't want him there. The systemic racism, sexism, white supremacy written into our foundations that were written and prepared to keep white landowning men in power and gave us the Electoral College, those are the things that put him in the White House in 2016. But in 2024, a majority of US voters, by nearly a 5 million vote margin, said we would rather have a white landowning male from the upper echelons of the 1% who is also a convicted felon and a sexual predator. We would rather have him as our president than a woman of color. We knew what we were getting. We know what these next 4 years are going to be like. He has not hidden anything from us. And we said as a nation, that's who we want to be our leader by 5 million votes. It is just what feels so frustrating is how incredibly clear this election has made it that our nation collectively has no interest in turning the page on our racist and sexist and white supremacist foundations. And a majority of US voters said, yeah, that's who we want to be our leader. That's what we want. And so any thoughts I had that we were making progress evaporated Wednesday morning when I saw the popular vote count. Because this is no longer just a Trump problem. The problem isn't Trump. That's not the problem anymore. Maybe it never was the problem. The problem isn't Trump. The problem, this is who we are and this is what we want. Trump didn't just co-opt the Republican Party. He co-opted the nation. People of color voted for him. That boggles my mind. Women voted for him. That blows my mind that women voted for him. Listen to one of his speeches. He absolutely was not campaigning to women. It blows my mind. And so, yeah, I've spent the last 24 hours accepting, I don't know, say accepting, digesting the fact of how little progress we've made My daughter is doing an assignment this week on the Reconstruction era. And she's my daughter. She knows about the truth about Abraham Lincoln. She knows the truth about the white supremacy of our country, right? And we're looking through the articles, and she's looking at the Freedmen's Society or Freedmen's Act that was working to set up HBCUs and how that ended. The Freedmen's Bureau ended in 1977, I think it was. And it ended because white people in the South were opposed to it because they didn't like the fact that it was helping Black people and not enough white people. And Congress lost the will to stand up for it, and they defunded it. And my daughter and I talked about how, the Civil War, Reconstruction, it was never about, our nation was never committed to equality between the white and Black races. Abraham Lincoln was a blatant, unapologetic, self-proclaimed white supremacist until the day he died. The North absolutely embraced the lie of white supremacy. We have a quote hanging in the Lincoln Memorial celebrating the fact that Abraham Lincoln did not believe that Black lives mattered. Celebrating that fact. And while I've been digesting and wrestling with that, this is who we were as a nation. This election has confirmed that not only is that who we were, this is who we are. By 5 million votes, we voted for a racist, a sexist, and a white supremacist president. So it's not a Trump problem. This is who we want. Now, I know everyone on the left is going to say, no, we voted for Kamala, we voted for Vice President Harris, we voted for the Democrats are the good guys, and that, please believe me, the Democrats are not the good guys. It's implicit versus explicit. And so the challenge here is we have a lot of work to do. Because Trump isn't the problem. Our foundations are not the problem. The problem is, this is what we want as a nation. In a democratic society, a majority of people voted and said, we prefer racism, sexism, and white supremacy. And that's who we want to lead us. And so this obviously is going to have implications on not only the work that I do, but the work that many other people do. And the Democrats are going to tell you that the problem is Trump or the problem is the Republicans. No, that's not the problem. The problem is, this is who we are and this is what we value as a nation. And so we need to change tactics. On election day, I did a podcast and I talked about the two parties tried to convince us that this is about converting people, right? We have to just switch a mindset from Democrat to Republican or vice versa, Republican to Democrat. And that's not, I said that's not the issue. The issue isn't, we're not going to convert. You're not going to go into a conversation with your relatives who's on the opposite end of the aisle that you sit on and voted the exact opposite way you voted. You're not going to convert them in a dialogue. You're not going to convert them by shaming them. You're not going to convert them by confronting with the facts, right? MAGA's a cult. The USA is a cult for that matter, but that's a whole nother conversation. And so it's not about converting someone, it's about shifting a paradigm. We have to expose people to a whole different way of looking at their history and at the world they live in, at the context that they're a part of. And paradigm shifts don't happen overnight. And so I'm beginning to understand that, yeah, we need to address things as a long-term paradigm shift and recognize that the majority of Americans don't want this change. Again, the Democrats don't want it either. I know this too, right? They're going to move towards it at a glacier pace. Please don't hear this as a two-party partisan argument, because it's not by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's what I find most challenging coming out of this 2024 election. This is no longer a Trump problem. This is a national identity. This is a national values problem. And we have to begin to frame our work and address it in that direction. This is the last time Trump can run for president. That actually is not even hopeful anymore, because we've demonstrated this is what the U.S. electorate wants. This is what one of the two parties is just going to give us in the future. We have to change our appetites as a nation. And until we change our appetites, we're going to keep being fed the same slop that we've been eating for the past 250 years. So what do we do? Just need to stop, right? The election's over. It was stressful for many, many people. People ran hard, worked hard, organized hard. We need to stop. We need to breathe. Calm our minds, rest our bodies. We need to feel. We need to emote in a healthy way, express our emotions. We need to practice health. Move, exercise, eat healthy, sleep well, understand and live into our circadian rhythms. We need to practice health. Chew our food. Breathe through our noses, right? And then we need to plan. We need to plan. We need to plan for the long term. We need to shift the paradigm for a nation. We need to train people how to speak prophetically. We need to train people how to have independent voices. We need to raise up a generation of people interested in politics who can think and operate outside the two-party system. We need to find leaders who are courageous enough to not kiss up to white landowning men from the 1%. We have to shift the paradigm, my relatives. It feels like it's a sprint, but it's not. It's not even a marathon. It's life. We have to work at this. So that's how I'm thinking. In no way, shape, or form am I giving up. In no way, shape, or form am I resigning or throwing in the towel. Every time I encounter a setback, I stop, I reevaluate. Okay, what do I need to do different? What adjustments do I need to make? What do we need to do now? How does this change the way I'm thinking or operating? This election is absolutely going to affect the content of my next book, Decolonizing Faith. And probably my book after that I will probably call something like Decolonizing Health. This election will absolutely affect that. Anyway, my relatives, I'm grateful you're here. Let me see who's on now. I'm going to jump into the chat and see who else is here. There's a lot of comments here. I can't, unfortunately, read everybody's, but thank you, Sonia, for being here. Thank you. I see Tempest and Susan and Hope and many other people. I appreciate all of you taking the time today to join me for my second cup of coffee. Allow me to share with you a few thoughts about this election. And I appreciate all of you. For those of you who are interested, one of the things I realize I need to continue doing is I need to find a way, and I'm going to start looking very, very closely. I need to somehow find a way to turn Unsettling Truths into a national read book. I'm very proud of the book. I'm actually this week is its 5th birthday. Tomorrow at noon Eastern time, I'm going to be doing a second cup of coffee with my co-author, Sung-Chan Ra. We're going to be talking about Unsettling Truths. But even what happened now is like, the challenge is we have no common memory as a nation. We have no common memory. We don't know our own history. And Unsettling Truths teaches the history. And so I need to increase my efforts to get more people to read Unsettling Truths. It's actually selling pretty good right now on Amazon, which is the only place I can really track its public sales. If you want to buy a signed copy, you can get it from my website. I just put the link in the chat. If you want to, you can also order 10 copies of the book, my book study special. If you do that, I will give you and your book study a free virtual 45-minute Q&A. I have about one of these a week, maybe 3 of them a month. I love these conversations. Paradigm shifting conversations. The kind of conversations I live for. So I welcome you, invite you to help me continue to find ways to get Unsettling Truths out in front of a broader audience. Second, I invite you, and this is going to also increase in importance in my work these next few months and years, is my Patreon. I work very hard to keep my voice independent. I don't monetize most of my social media. I don't work for any organization or institution. I don't let anyone pay my entire salary. I have multiple streams of income, mostly coming through my speaking and my writing. Patreon is one of the more consistent places I get my income from. And what people who subscribe to me on Patreon do is they allow me two things. A place to kind of talk about these issues at a deeper level, which I really, really like. And B, it helps me keep my voice financially independent by getting the support from people through Patreon who can support my work very directly. It helps keep my voice independent. And so I'm grateful to everyone who subscribed to me on Patreon. If you haven't subscribed to me there, I've been on there for about 3 years. So once you subscribe, whatever tier you subscribe to, you get a wealth of archived information at all the different tiers. One of the more popular tiers is my Ask Questions tier, where once a month I have a Q&A, just a dialogue with people about things that have happened, things I've written, things I've said, talking about current events, political events, other things going on in society. So I invite you, my relatives, read Unsettling Truth, subscribe to my work on Patreon, subscribe to my podcast here, share my podcast with as many people as you can. Help me get the word out. Help me engage. I am so excited about and committed to figuring out a way to get our nation to talk about these things. Engaging a national dialogue without selling my soul to advertisers and large corporations and institutions, because that will maybe give me a platform, but it will not give me the ability to say much of what I really think. So I have to be very careful about how I build my national platform and voice, because if I want to be able to say the things that need to be said, I cannot tie myself too closely with major institutions and corporations, because they will silence me. They will absolutely silence me. My relatives, I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a great day. And I hope the rest of your week goes well. I invite you to join me tomorrow, Friday, November 8th at noon on my second cup of coffee. I'll be talking with my co-author, Seung-Chan Ra, discussing the 5 years that Unsettling Truth has been out. And I always enjoy talking with Seung-Chan. He's one of my best friends and great brother, great partner, great colleague to have. And so I'm very excited to have a chance with him tomorrow. My relatives, walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Yá'át'ééh and Hakona.